Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
Nick, I think we sort of touched on this in the last episode, a little trend emerging, but you have some huge news with your ballot tracking. So I want to get out of your way and let you explain it.
Yeah, Michael, when we look at the Nanos ballot tracking, we do this every week. What's clear is that conservative support is now hemorrhaging to the Liberals. And Michael, if you remember back just before Justin Trudeau stepped down, the Conservatives had a whopping 27-point advantage. It was like 47-20 for the federal Conservatives. And what we've seen is since Justin Trudeau announced that he was stepping down, what we're seeing is people moving from the Conservatives to the Liberals. And after all, let's face it, when the Conservatives are at 47%, those aren't all Conservatives. There's probably a lot of Liberals in that group. But what we're seeing is a significant shift where now the ballot numbers are 38-30 between the federal Conservatives and the federal Liberals. So only 8 points between those two front-running parties.
That's it. I mean, it was basically a year of a double-digit lead for the Conservatives. This is pretty amazing. So, is this exhaustion with Justin Trudeau? Is this people getting excited about a potential new Liberal leader like Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gold, or Mark Carney? What's driving this?
I think there are a number of things that are at play. First of all, with Justin Trudeau announcing that he would be stepping down, that was a big factor. The other thing is that Canadians are increasingly focused on the tariffs and Donald Trump, and both Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government, and also the Liberal candidates seeking the leadership of the Liberal Party of Ontario are focused on that. And one of the things I think it's important to put on the table is that last year Pierre Poilievre was a bit ahead of the curve, focusing on people struggling to pay for the groceries and struggling to pay for the rent and the mortgage and stuff like that and the cost of living. And he caught the Liberals flat-footed. And, that's when the numbers really started to move positively for the federal Conservatives. I think right now, kind of like the shoe's on the other foot, because the Liberals are talking about Trump and tariffs, and Pierre Poilievre is starting to catch up. So I think that's probably what explains the movement, at least in the last 4 weeks.
On that note, Nick, yeah, Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre, he's really been focused on attacking Trudeau, as he said, on a carbon tax election, cost of living issues. This has really switched things up for him with Trudeau's resignation and Trump. I want to play a clip of him just speaking the other day in Iqaluit. Listen to this.
Let me be clear. The Canadian Arctic belongs to Canadians, and Canadians will take back control of their Arctic waters, Arctic skies, and Arctic land. After 9 years of Liberal incompetence and disdain, our military is weakened and our allies no longer respect us. Our safety, territory, and trade with the U.S. requires we take back control of our north. This gigantic area makes up 40% of our land mass and 75% of our coastline.
So no longer, a carbon tax election. He's still hammering away at the Liberals. But what do you make of this?
Well, think of it this way. The winning franchise for Pierre Poilievre for 2024 was kind of like a three-legged stool. It was him and the Conservatives as agents of change, attacking Justin Trudeau, and then attacking the Liberal government, right? Well, two of those legs are out for all intents and purposes. Justin Trudeau is no longer the leader of the Liberal Party. And also, at least the candidates who are vying for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada are kind of like throwing policy overboard and throwing the last 10 years overboard to try to be a little more relevant than they have been in the past. So, I think for Pierre Poilievre, he's got to catch up in terms of focusing on tariffs. I'm not sure Canadians are worried about Arctic sovereignty. They know that it's important, but you know what? If steel, aluminum, our energy sector is under threat, jobs are under threat. I think that's probably what they want to hear more about from Pierre Poilievre, because, the thing is he's still ahead in the polls. He's still the person most likely to win the election and be the next Prime Minister. And that's really what they want to hear about. And yes, the Arctic's important, but if you are worried about whether you have a job and where the economy is going, you're probably not going to have as much of a focus on things like the Arctic.
Uh, Nik, you track the issues that matter most to Canadians. What are you seeing there?
So every week we ask the top unprompted national issue of concern. People can say whatever they want. Jobs is still number one at 19%. But look to see, check it out. What's number two, or the second most important issue? Trump and tariffs at 10%. 4 weeks ago, 1% of Canadians, or 1 out of 100, actually mentioned Trump or tariffs specifically. Now that's up to 10%. You can see rounding up the top three is inflation at 10%. So you can see economic issues, meat and potatoes issues, and also Donald Trump and tariffs mixed in with all of that stuff.
Nik, going back to the ballot tracking, are there any interesting notes in your regional breakdown?
Yeah, we were looking at which groups or clusters of voters were shifting over to the Liberals over the last number of weeks. One of them is women. And the thing is that by the end of 2024, many women had deserted the Liberal Party. And that's bad news for the Liberals, because it's for all intents and purposes impossible for them to win an election unless women are supporting them. So what we've seen, at least, is the Liberals starting to do better among women than they have, at least over the last couple of months. And the other one, and this is also important for the Liberals, is the province of Quebec. Their numbers are up in the province of Quebec. Quebec is usually their regional base. If they don't do well in the province of Quebec, they can't wage war in other parts of the country and have a chance to win. And what we're seeing is a little bit of a negative pressure on the Conservative support in the province of Quebec. So this doesn't mean that the Conservatives, won't hold on to the seats that they have in the province of Quebec, but it's just a little bit of movement away from the Conservatives and towards the Liberals in Quebec.
Uh, Nik, have you ever seen anything like this where the numbers have flipped so quickly? And I guess a lot of this can be attributed to, as you said, Trudeau's resignation, but also U.S. President Donald Trump and the threat of tariffs.
Usually takes a number of things to move the numbers. It's never one thing. And in this particular case, I think there are three things that basically happened at the same time that moved the numbers. First of all, Justin Trudeau stepping down being a key factor, having the attention of Canadians. Second of all, Donald Trump and tariffs happening within a week. And third, Pierre Poilievre still talking about the carbon tax election, carbon tax, Carney and Freeland and all that kind of stuff, and the tired Liberal government, when those are issues. Now, those are issues of the past. Canadians want to hear about the future. I think roll up those three things, and it explains why the race has tightened between the Conservatives and the Liberals. That said, we have to be clear, the Conservatives still have an 8-point advantage. It's enough to win an election if an election were held today, but what we do know, election won't be held today.
Nik, we really can't escape talking about Trump, especially, with all the looming tariffs. You've done a survey on how Canadians feel, about this and what Canada should do. What did you learn?
In a survey that we just released with CTV News and the Globe and Mail, Michael, are you part Irish?
English and Scottish, but
English. Oh,
no
okay. So
Irish.
you're more of like Braveheart, kind of whatever.
Sure. Half.
Anyways, I was asking if you're Irish because I was going to make the Fighting Irish. I'm not talking
Mm.
about the football in Notre Dame, the university. I'm talking about just mixing it up a little bit. It's pretty clear that Donald Trump has kind of piqued a little bit of the fighting Irish in Canadians. In the CTV News Globe and Mail survey, when we asked about different things that could be done, for example, taking American beer, wine, and liquor off the shelves in the provinces, doing that, having what I'll say a dollar for dollar counter tariff, or even looking at restricting exports of oil, natural gas, and electricity. What's clear is that a majority of Canadians would support any one of those initiatives in response to Donald Trump's tariffs. The ones that were the most popular was taking American booze off the shelves and also kind of responding in kind. Still a majority of Canadians were good with restricting exports on the energy front. And here's a little interesting little side note that I'm sure I'll get lots of email comments about and on social media. Even a majority of Canadians that live in the prairies are in favor of restricting exports of oil, natural gas, and electricity to the United States if the United States decided to slap tariffs onto Canada. So a little bit of the Fighting Irish means that there's lots of latitude. So if you're, what I'll say, on the other side of the table, right, the Trump administration, you're dealing with the Canadians, you're looking at polling like this, you're going to know that the premiers, together with the prime minister, have latitude to do stuff and political license to respond to the Americans.
I find this fascinating because, you know, we've already seen Nik, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith really fighting in support of maintaining energy exports to the US, not turning that stuff off. But you're saying that, you know, in a place like Saskatchewan, which has huge oil reserves, that there's a little bit of appetite for that.
Yeah, well, there's appetite in, you know, in our prairie sample includes Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba,
Hmm.
proportionate to their population. I guess what this means is if Donald Trump does slap tariffs on Canadian goods, are we still going to be doing everything on the energy front that we do with them? Will that be kind of exempt from stuff? And will we be giving Americans a little bit of a break or a buy on that? I think what it suggests is that, you know, if Donald Trump did slap tariffs on Canada, that for all intents and purposes, almost everything is on the table. The other interesting thing that's quite striking is that when we ask Canadians whether they think that we could actually win a tariff war or whether, you know, we'd get crushed, that wasn't the question, but that's the intent of the question. About just as many Canadians believe that we can go toe-to-toe with the Americans as believe that we cannot, and that if we did engage in a trade war with the US, that it would have materially negative impact on the Canadian economy. So we're united on what we'd be open to do, but we're
Hmm.
not confident 100% that it will work. And a significant proportion, about 4 out of every 10, believe that if we do go down this path, it'll lead to a negative impact on the Canadian economy.
Nik, you also did a survey on the liberal leadership contenders and who might be best positioned to deal with Trump. Who was in the lead on that?
I just like to say it included the liberal leadership contenders plus Pierre Poilievre, the leader
Right.
of the
Yes.
Conservatives, because those are the individuals that uh, would hypothetically be prime minister to deal with President Trump. And what it showed is so we had, you know, for example, Pierre Poilievre in a randomized list, Pierre Poilievre, Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gold. And Mark Carney actually comes out on top. About 40% of Canadians believe that he would be the best at negotiating with Trump, followed by Pierre Poilievre, who's about 14 points back or thereabouts at around 26. And Chrystia Freeland, the person that did negotiate with Donald Trump last time, actually her numbers were in the teens. So she significantly trailed both Poilievre and Carney.
I'm a little surprised at that, Nik, because she does have experience. She did help renegotiate NAFTA, but she's only at 14%.
Yeah, maybe it's because Donald Trump said he doesn't like her. I think the reality is that if we want to have an agreement and have a negotiation, uh, it's probably not good to have someone that the president says, I don't like that person. And maybe you're thinking that, you know, we can be tough and puff ourselves up and deal with the president. But you know, we have to accept and recognize the fact that the United States is 10 times the size of Canada in terms of its economic might, that they're in the driver's seat. We need to have a cordial relationship. We need to have a stable relationship. But you know, the Americans have more levers at their disposal than Canadians, and that you know, having someone that is not uh, liked, why don't we just say, by Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump doesn't have to like whoever the prime minister is. He just needs to kind of accept and be okay with that. And it looks like for some Canadians, because she's made a point of saying that he doesn't like me, and that's probably a good thing, and he's made a point of saying I don't like her. Canadians are like, okay, well, maybe you're not the best person, perhaps, to deal with the Trump administration.
Nik, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll look at the Ontario election. Nik, we're just weeks away from an Ontario election, and you have been tracking the ballot support for that one for CTV News. What's the latest on the nightly tracking?
Well, the latest CTV News Nanos tracking has the Progressive Conservatives led by Doug Ford at 44%, and followed by the Liberals at 32, and the NDP at 17. In the beginning of the tracking, the Progressive Conservatives had about a 16-point advantage. They're at about a 12-point advantage. Toronto's basically a toss-up, but once we get outside of Toronto and all the other regions across the province, the Progressive Conservatives, that is, are leading, and the Progressive Conservatives are doing well among men and older voters. The New Democrats are at 17. They're lower than what they were at in the last provincial election, and they're doing a little better among younger voters under 35 years of age, but they're still noticeably trailing the provincial Liberals and, of course, the provincial Progressive Conservatives, who have the advantage right now.
Nik, Doug Ford argued that he needed to trigger an early election because it was about a year earlier than usual, in order to get a strong mandate to help protect Ontario's economy against potential tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump. Do Ontarians agree with that decision?
Well, let's face it, whoever happens to be the premier and the governor of the day can have whatever explanation they want to justify a provincial election. This particular provincial election is early compared to when it was scheduled in 2026. When we asked Ontarians in a survey for CTV News about what the most important issue that would likely influence their vote in the upcoming provincial election, at the very top of the list was healthcare, followed by jobs, and actually Trump and tariffs was number 3. It was the third most important issue. What this tells me is that, yes, part of the election should be about Donald Trump and tariffs. However, to really connect with voters, they want to hear about healthcare and jobs from all of the provincial party leaders. So, I would expect when we get to the leaders debate in the provincial election that, not only will there be chit chat about Donald Trump and tariffs, but Ontarians at least will be very focused and attentive on stuff related to healthcare and making the healthcare system stronger, and also jobs.
Nik, you said that there's been some change amongst the Liberal and NDP votes. Do you think Ontarians might coalesce against a single opposition party, or are you seeing any other interesting trends emerging so far?
Well, we haven't seen that, like, for example, progressive voters moving to the Liberal Party in order to block Doug Ford. Because, the thing is that I think if the race narrowed a bit, we could see that dynamic. But, with the Progressive Conservatives with a, 12-point advantage right now, it's his to lose. That said, there's still a couple more weeks left in the election campaign. People will be wanting and will be tuning in to the leaders debate. It'll be interesting to see right after the leaders debate whether the trend line starts to take shape for the very closing days of the campaign. And that's what I'm really watching for right now.
Nik, fascinating stuff as always. Thanks very much.
Take it easy.